And how do you feel about our proposition of removing helmets from football?
I think that is a very interesting and creative idea. I would want to see how that would impact other injuries. I don't. How did we ever get to the place where we wore helmets? That's what I mean.
The idea that padding had to help, but now we're reverting back to its more functional form.
Yeah.
Like when you lift your own head up instead of just relying on the helmet, you prevent your head from smacking the ground.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'd want to see is does it alter other injuries? But it seems like it might be a good idea.
All right. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Go Grizz!
Yay!
This is SportsCenter.
Thank you, Dean Shook, for that interview. Now, moving on from collegiate football to the NFL, tonight in studios with me, I have Dane and Merrill, representatives from the NFL, to talk about the biggest concern the league has, which is the growing concussion problem. Now, Merrill, what is a concussion?
Well, Sarah, glad you asked. A basic concussion is a type of traumatic brain injury that's caused by a bump, blow, or a jolt. And this causes the brain to temporarily shake and bounce back and forth in the head, damaging brain cells and causing a chemical to be created called CTE, which is very damaging. These concussions can happen from players hitting helmet to helmet, hard hits against the ground, or just any blow to the head that's traumatic to their head. So, with all this being said, Dane, do you think that concussions are a huge problem in the NFL, or is it just all hype?
Looking at the numbers, yeah, it is a serious problem with the NFL right now. In the past 6 years, there's been a 25% decrease in football participation at the younger levels. So that's looking at, your Pop Warner, middle school, high school football. With that decrease, the NFL can only expect a decrease in fan base as well, which a 25% decrease in their fan base would be astronomical considering how big their fan base is right now. Something else to look at is the lawsuits they've had in the recent years considering concussions. And, what do you think about that?
I mean, that lawsuit was very detrimental to their reputation, and not only that, but it really brought concussions on a scale to a national level. Now everybody knew concussions were a serious injury before they were downplayed, downsized. But in 2007, they started a new concussion protocol in the NFL, and I'm not going to say it definitely worked right off the bat, but there was definitely more reported concussions. Whether there's more concussions in general, that's to be a deciding factor. But the lawsuit was a massive lawsuit. I mean, they agreed to, what was it again? Like $5 million per player, or
they're looking at paying out $5 million per player if they, get some kind of disease like Lou Gehrig's or some serious terminal illness like that. You're looking at $4 million for families of players who have traumatic brain injuries that lead to CTE. And you're looking at about $3.5 million for players that get Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other diseases like that when they grow old. So this is expected to cost the NFL about $1 billion in the future, which is an astronomically huge number.
I mean, $1 billion when it was only settled in 2013 for 760, and that was considered too little. I mean, who knows? Maybe $1 billion is still too little.
Yeah, only the future will tell. I mean, it's a growing problem.
Do you think also that the concussion movie had anything to do with this new problem in the NFL?
It was just kind of a media storm for the NFL almost all at one time. The movie came out. There was a lot of press about the problems that concussions were having on players and their future, and it just kind of all formed this storm for the NFL that just hit them recently.
Yeah, Will Smith bringing light to CTEs, which devastated, not very many players yet, but in the future we can only expect more and more, and with it costing $15.38 million a year already, a CTE, which is only discoverable in an autopsy, that's going to cost the NFL a pretty penny. So what are the solutions that we're looking at?
Well, I mean, I heard there was this new turf, but I'm not too sure about it. But we do have a expert here in studio today. How about we roll to him?
Yeah, let's go to Ed, our expert on turf.
Thank you so much again, Ed, for that demonstration. Now, how do you guys feel about the turf solutions?
Well, I don't know, Sarah. I mean, we talked about this before. It's just going to be really hard to implement in the league, and there's 32 teams. Not every single team is going to want to do this. Not every team is privately owned and is going to want to do this, and not every team already has turf, and it's going to be easy to change from grass to turf and then turf to a different turf. This new turf is very expensive from what I hear from Dane.
Yeah, it's going to be astronomically expensive, and it's going to be a lot to ask all the franchises in the NFL to, fork out all this money for this turf that, it's supposed to help, but until you install it on all the fields in the NFL, how are you going to know?
Yeah, you can't.
And then kind of like you brought up with the not all teams are privately owned, you look at like the Packers. How are they going to do, it's a publicly held company.
They haven't changed their stadium since it's been built. It hasn't been changed.
Much.
We would have known. Well, versus like teams still trying to, there's teams like the Raiders that could implement this easily that are, they're going to move. Or teams like that, there are teams that are looking to move. But there's teams that are stuck in their hole and they're stuck in their ways and they're definitely not going to change to this new turf. So, is there any other solutions that we could maybe have for the NFL?
You could look at helmets. Obviously, if you're looking at a head injury, looking at the piece of equipment that protects the head is probably going to be one of your best options. So, we have actually an expert on helmets that we'd like to go to. So let's go to Mr. Hidalgo with helmets.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Now, the helmets, that's pretty impressive. It's come such a long way from where it was in the beginning. Like, we were just wearing soft leather caps on our heads. Like, what were we thinking?
I mean, it's crazy, Sarah. If you look at these timelines, the 1920s when, football first started to become popular, America's game, soft leather helmets, like you're saying. Then 30s, you could see the transgression through the decades, how we went from hard helmets, then to plastic, then we went to face masks, then we went to padding inside your helmets. Then eventually we changed the material of the helmets from plastic to polycarbonate. Then in the early thousands, Rydell came out with the concussion like revolutionary helmet with padding, ultimate face mask, and then it was made with thermoresin material instead of polycarbonate, which is a crazy strong material. Here's the thing, though. After 2000s, there hasn't been really any new technology put into helmets, though. What do you think, Dane?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You look at over the last, 60, 70 years, and every 10 years, there's been a new development for helmets. But then we're looking at, since the 2000s, it's going on almost 20 years, and we've got nothing. So, it's about time that we have some helmets like Mr. Hidalgo was talking about. But, a lot of people would argue that this still isn't going to fix the concussion solution. Do you think it's a viable option?
We could still go back to the cost. $1,400 per helmet. Are they going to even consider that a viable cost? What do you think, Sarah?
I don't know. Each team requires 52 players, right?
53-man roster.
53-man rosters. So 53 times 1,400. We are looking at astronomical prices to make sure that everyone has the best of the best headgear. And it seems like there might be a simpler solution, like increase the regulations.
Well, even so, do you think if we all switch these helmets, we'd have to have someone sit there and regulate their helmets? Or now we have to have more regulations and more people to regulate the regulations?
Yeah, it just becomes a regulatory bureaucracy. And do we really want the NFL to turn into that? I don't think so.
No. We saw with certain players, responded to other regulations with illegal hits, helmet to helmets, ones that Roger Goodell considered unsafe. It was very negative. They did not like paying the fines, even though they paid them. They still hit people illegally and with their helmets. It's almost like helmets have become a weapon.
Yeah, and that's my biggest issue with the more advanced helmets is, you look at the traditional football and how it's taught and how tackling is taught really to our young football players, and it's heads up. You lead with your head, and your head is the tip of the missile coming in, and it's got all your body weight behind it. So we can put the nicest, best helmets on our players, but they're still going to lead with their heads because they have more protection. So I don't think that protecting the head more is going to be a viable option because they're still going to hit people with their head.
Almost an adverse effect.
Yeah.
So do you think there's any viable solution, Dane?
Call me crazy, but I think the most viable option is actually to take helmets out of the game of football. So, like I was just talking about, with the more advanced helmets, you get to the point where players are more willing to use their heads. So by taking helmets out, players aren't going to stick their heads in there. It's the old saying that, I was always taught growing up playing football, just stick your head in there. Well, sticking your head in there is not good for you. And when you don't have a helmet, you're not going to be willing to do it.
Well, that is one crazy idea, and I bet you Rydell and Shutt are furious with you with that right now. But, I think someone might have already predicted this right here in a little clip we have right here.
While we're at it, we'll have a balloon instead of a ball, and whoever catches the balloon tries to run while all the other players hug. You think the students would like that? Oh, they'd love it. A sport where safety is all that matters? How about we call it Sarcastoball? Okay, would you mind being the coach of the South Park Sarcastoball team? Jesus Christ. Yes, I would love to be the coach of the Sarcastoball team.